Chapter 65. Looks like I still have to rely on myself to cultivate martial arts. I have to take it one step at a time. I can't take any shortcuts. Su Qin's expression was slightly emotional. With a thought, a bottle of white jade-colored medicinal pills appeared in front of him. As soon as the bottle of pills appeared, the essence qi in the surroundings started to vibrate. When Su Qin opened the bottle and poured the pills into his hand, the essence qi in the surroundings started to boil. Su Qin frowned and spread out his divine will. In an instant, the surging heaven-earth yuan qi was completely suppressed, and the surroundings returned to normal. Glazed golden core. Su Qin looked at the colorless, pure and transparent medicinal pill in his hand and muttered. The glazed golden core was a legendary pill in the Shaolin Temple. Only the Venerable Arhat was qualified to make it. Even so, the Venerable Arhat had to spend a lot of time and energy to make a glazed golden core. He even had to use his own origin to make it. Normally, unless there was a special reason, no Venerable Arhat was willing to make a glazed golden core because it wasn't worth it. The Shaolin Temple had been open for thousands of years and no more than 10 glazed golden cores had appeared. However, the glazed golden core was so difficult to make because its effect was too terrifying. Even the Venerable Arhat could save decades of hard work after taking a glazed golden core. During the period when the effect was maintained, it would be easier for the Venerable to sense the world and control the essence qi. Looks like I have to use it sparingly. Su Qin looked at the glazed golden core in his hand and thought. He has been signing in at the Shaolin Temple for 20 years, but he has only obtained a few hundred glazed golden cores. Gulp. Su Qin swallowed the glazed golden core. The glazed golden core didn't melt in the mouth like the Grand Restore pill. It was unusually sturdy and kept sinking into Su Qin's stomach, slowly releasing its effects. Su Qin felt that his strength, which had remained stagnant, slowly began to rise again. In addition, Su Qin also noticed that after taking the glazed golden elixir, his control of heaven and earth yuan qi became easier. Before he took the glazed gold core, Su Qin could only control the natural energies within a radius of a few miles. But now, Su Qin felt that this range had at least doubled. What did this mean? One had to know that the battle between Venerable Arhat had already transcended himself. It was equivalent to a confrontation between two worlds. At this time, the importance of controlling the heaven and earth energy was obvious. This glazed golden core not only saved Su Qin tens of miles of hard work, but also nearly doubled his strength during the duration of the medicinal effect. The effects of the medicine will last for about 1 to 2 months. Su Qin estimated in his heart that he was in a good mood. Although after taking the glazed golden elixir, his cultivation speed was still not as fast as when he was at the 9th level of martial arts, but he was still much faster than other Venerable Arhat and martial arts legends. Time passed slowly. In order to obtain a sufficient supply of glazed golden elixir, Su Qin would sign in at the Bodhi court. Of course, this was not absolute. Sometimes Su Qin would also sign in at the Demon Subduing Tower or the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. On this day, Su Qin passed by the Demon Subduing Tower and suddenly stopped. Counting the time, it's been a long time since I signed in here. Su Qin's thoughts moved. Although the things that come out of the Demon Subduing Tower are basically related to demons, nothing is absolute. What if something good comes out? Thinking of this, Su Qin said silently in his heart. System, sign in. Congratulations to the host for signing in successfully and obtaining the Demon Subduing Seal. Prompt. This place is about to run out of Dao accumulation and will soon become a non-repeatable sign in place. 2 consecutive cold, mechanical sounds resounded in Su Qin's ears. Non-repeatable sign in place? Su Qin was slightly taken aback. Is the Dao accumulation about to run out? Su Qin's mind turned quickly, and finally he sighed softly. In fact, Su Qin had long known that such a day would come. On the first day of activating the system, Su Qin knew that the system's sign-in was determined by the amount of Dao accumulation at the sign-in place. The more Dao accumulation, the more sign-in. But no matter how much Dao accumulation there is, there will be a day when it is exhausted. If the demon subduing tower is like this, the hidden scriptures pavilion and the Bodhi court will probably be the same in the future. What a pity! Su Qin turned around and left. Although Su Qin basically has no use for the cultivation techniques and treasures obtained from signing in at the demon subduing tower, it is still a little distressing to lose a place to fleece for nothing. Demon subduing seal? Su Qin's mind merged into the system space. In a corner of the space, there was a small square seal floating in the air. This small seal was pitch black, and its surface was faintly stained with some blood. In addition, Su Qin felt a monstrous suppression from this small seal. All the demons in the world can be suppressed. Su Qin had a feeling that if the demon lord was still alive, his strength would be suppressed by 99% just by looking at this small seal. This small seal stained with blood is simply the nemesis of the demon path in the world. Not bad, not bad. Su Qin was extremely satisfied. Although the demon lord is dead, and the demon sect is almost destroyed, Su Qin knew through the animal skin that there may be martial arts legends of the demon sect in the endless deep sea outside the continent. Now that he has obtained this small seal, Su Qin's confidence suddenly increased. In the following time, except for signing in, Su Qin spent almost all his time in the back mountain forbidden area. The effect of the glazed golden core lasts for 1 to 2 months. Su Qin basically takes a new glazed golden core every time the effect of the previous one ends. According to the ancient records left by the Shaolin Temple, the realm of Venerable Arhat is divided into 9 levels. When one first enters the realm of Arhat, it is the first level of Arhat. After that, it is the second level of Arhat, the third level of Arhat, until the 9th level. Su Qin sat cross-legged, and the cultivation realm of Venerable Arhat quickly flashed through his mind. Venerable Arhat is like this, and martial arts legends are similar. 900 years ago, Pao was the first level of Arhat. He used the Buddha's palm and only suppressed the Devil Buddha. This means that the Devil Buddha is stronger than Pao Arhat? Su Qin guessed in his heart. At the same time, in an inn, a storyteller continued to speak eloquently. You're right. It is said that the Devil Lord's strength is unparalleled. He led the elites of the Devil sect and attacked the Shaolin Temple, wanting to destroy this 1,000-year-old temple. At this moment, a Venerable Arhat walked out of the Shaolin Temple, and with a raise of his hand, the demons of the Devil Path were reduced to ashes. Many diners listened with relish. Now that the Devil Lord was destroyed in the Shaolin Temple, rumors were flying everywhere. Some said that Arhat from hundreds of years ago was in the Shaolin Temple, some said that a passing martial arts legend killed the Devil Lord, and so on. And in a corner of the inn, a man in white with a faint flying knife mark between his eyebrows suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the Shaolin Temple. Venerable Arhat. Chapter 66. The Shaolin Temple actually has Venerable Arhat? The white-robed man with a faint flying knife mark on his forehead frowned slightly. If someone who is familiar with Jianghu is here, they will definitely recognize that the white-robed man is the successor of Shao Li's flying dagger. Shao Li's flying dagger never misses. These 8 words are famous all over the world. Even those grade 1 great grandmasters who roam the martial arts world are extremely afraid of the flying dagger descendant. It shouldn't be Venerable Arhat. It's just a rumor. The white-robed man thought for a while and shook his head. One must know that whether it is Venerable Arhat or a legend, they are both rare. If the Shaolin Temple really has an Arhat, then how could it be that they don't have a grade 1 great grandmaster and almost fell out of the great sects? It's just that the Demon Lord's death is a fact. With the strength of the Demon Lord, I'm afraid that it is a grade 1 great perfection that can make him unable to escape. The white-robed man stroked his chin, his eyes filled with thoughts. He is not a fool. Even if he doesn't think that the Shaolin Temple has Venerable Arhat, he does not think that the Shaolin Temple is a soft persimmon. But isn't this what I want? A grade 1 great perfection. If I observe his divinity, can he give me enough pressure? The white-robed man's eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of heat. The white-robed man did not intend to provoke the grade 1 great perfection of the Shaolin Temple. A grade 1 great perfection's body? divine sense, and internal strength have completed the transformation. It is far from what he can resist. The white-robed man just wants to use the strength of the other party's divinity to pressure himself to take the last step. The personalities of the successors of the Flying Dagger are different. Some are approachable, some are gentle, some hate evil, and some pursue the limits of martial Tao. But this white-robed man pursues the limits of martial Tao his whole life. Every successor of the Flying Dagger has mastered the Flying Dagger divine art. The Flying Dagger divine art is different from the vast majority of martial arts in the world. The Flying Dagger unique skill was a spiritual secret skill. To put it simply, if one wanted to block the Flying Dagger thrown out by the successor of the Flying Dagger, it was useless to rely on inner strength and physical strength alone. He could only depend on whether his god was strong enough. If the god could withstand it, he would live. If the god couldn't block it, it would die. As such, normally, if a martial artist below grade 1 encounters the descendant of the Flying Dagger, they will definitely die. As for a grade 1 great grandmaster, only a grade 1 great grandmaster who has begun to nurture their own divinity can block it. However, this was not absolute. It still depended on whether the god of the Flying Dagger was strong enough. Of course, the Flying Dagger lost art was not without its flaws. Every time the descendant of the Flying Dagger swung his blade, he would exhaust all of his energy and would need a period of time to recover. At that time, the descendant of the Flying Dagger might not even be able to defeat an ordinary person. In an individual fight, the descendant of the Flying Dagger can instantly kill any martial artist below grade 1 great grandmaster. However, in the face of the encirclement, the successor of the Flying Dagger could only admit defeat, because he could only swing his blade once in a short period of time. After that, he would be equivalent to a cripple. Since the birth of the white-clothed man, he had swung his blade 9 times, and each time, a powerful martial artist fell. The strongest one was a grade 1 great grandmaster from Nanming country. Through these 9 blades, the white-clothed man constantly sharpened his god. He was almost one step away from transforming his god and condensing his divine sense. Unfortunately, although this step seems simple, in fact, it is like a natural chasm. If he did not have enough stimulation from the outside world to withstand the pressure of the powerful martial artist's spirit, the successor of the Flying Dagger would not have been able to complete this last leap. It's a pity that eunuch Zhao in the Emperor of Tang's palace seems to have condensed his divine sense, but I can't enter the imperial palace at all. The white-clothed man sighed. However, I can't enter the imperial palace, but I can still enter the Shaolin Temple. The white-clothed man's spirit shook. Although the Shaolin Temple is a martial arts sect, it does not prohibit pilgrims from entering to worship Buddha. The white-clothed man can disguise himself as a pilgrim and sneak into the Shaolin Temple. As long as he enters the Shaolin Temple, the white-clothed man can feel all the gods nearby through the Flying Dagger divine art. As long as the grade 1 great perfection is still in the Shaolin Temple, it will not escape the white-clothed man's perception. Shaolin Temple. Su Qin completed today's sign in opportunity. His eyes turned slightly and looked outside the Shaolin Temple. Since the death of the Demon Lord, there have been many spies hiding in the dark outside the Shaolin Temple. Even the pilgrims who enter the temple every day to worship Buddha are disguised by martial artists. Although Su Qin is clear about this scene, he is too lazy to take action. As long as they don't disturb him, the rest will be taken care of by the abbot. By the way, when the 9-yang divine art is cultivated to the extreme, it is said that one can burn mountains and boil seas. I can try it today. Su Qin's thoughts moved. 9-yang divine art is a Buddhist divine art. Su Qin's cultivation of 9-yang divine art is indirectly corroborating with the creator of 9-yang divine art. After entering the Arhat realm, one needs to gather the Tao of 100 schools of thought to verify oneself. Thinking of this, Su Qin returned to the back mountain, sat cross-legged, and quickly operated the 9-yang divine art. Outside the great strength hall, the white-clothed man disguised himself as a pilgrim and walked to a corner without leaving a trace. After stopping, The white-clothed man glanced around and took a deep breath. Just for a while. Using the flying dagger divine art to observe the God of others, as long as it is not long, even a grade 1 great perfection will not notice anything. The white-clothed man calmed down and thought silently. As for whether he can withstand the God of a grade 1 great perfection, the white-clothed man is still confident. As the successor of this generation's flying dagger, he is extremely good at God. As long as he does not seek death and observe the God of a legend, it should not be a big problem. Thinking of this, the white-clothed man gently closed his eyes, raised his right hand, and touched the flying dagger imprint between his eyebrows. 1. The next moment, the white-clothed man only felt his spirit rising infinitely, and he could vaguely perceive the light spots all around him. Is that the God of the many disciples and pilgrims of the Shaolin Temple? The white-clothed man did not pay attention to this, and continued to spread his thoughts in all directions. This is not it. That is not it either. The white-clothed man frowned slightly, and cold sweat faintly appeared. If he continues, he is afraid that he will exceed his limit. Just when the white-clothed man was about to give up, his thoughts finally spread to the back mountain of the Shaolin Temple. The next moment, the white-clothed man saw an unforgettable scene. He saw that within the range of his perception, 9 vast and scorching great suns suddenly appeared. The 9 suns crossed the sky, shining brightly, illuminating the darkness and burning the void. Wherever the 9 suns passed, all things were silent, and life was extinguished. This is, the white-clothed man only felt that his God was beginning to collapse, and he knelt on the ground with a plop, his eyes bleeding, and his expression was extremely frightened. P.S. 4th update is over, and looking for monthly votes, let's set an update rule. Now the monthly votes are more than 2,000, if it exceeds 3,000 tomorrow, then it will be 5th update. Chapter 67. The white-clothed man trembled and knelt on the ground. The flying knife mark between his eyebrows faintly began to collapse. It must be known that the descendants of the flying knife did not cultivate their internal strength, nor did they cultivate their body. They only focused on the cultivation of their divinity. Of course, not cultivating their internal strength does not mean that the descendants of the flying knife do not understand martial arts at all, but compared to their powerful divinity, the internal strength of the descendants of the flying knife is negligible. It is because of this extreme that each generation of the descendants of the flying knife is terrifying. But at this moment, the flying knife mark that manifested the white-clothed man's divinity began to collapse. How incredible is this? Maybe a real grade 1 great perfection can kill the white-clothed man, but it is impossible to destroy the white-clothed man's divinity. The divinity not only represents the spiritual cultivation of the white-clothed man, but also his own beliefs. The body can die, but beliefs are not so easy to destroy. That is, the descendant of the flying knife's eyes bled. He just spread his perception through the flying knife divine art and barely got close to the back mountain forbidden area, and then looked at it from a distance. As a result, 9 vast and scorching great suns appeared in the sky, as if they had returned to the ancient mythological era. The 9 great suns descended and filled the world. How could the white-clothed man's divinity withstand all this? It collapsed on the spot, and even an inexplicable backlash came to his body. How can there be such a vast and incredible divinity in the world? The white-clothed man's voice trembled slightly. Normally, the divinity of an ordinary person is almost equivalent to a dot of light. Maybe the divinity of a martial artist is slightly bigger. But even the divinity of a grade 1 great grandmaster is only comparable to a fireball. However, the God that the white-robed man had sensed from the forbidden grounds at the back of the mountain was comparable to the deep void. It encompassed and contained everything. At the same time, back mountain forbidden area. Su Qin, who was operating the 9 Yang divine art, quietly opened his eyes. Is someone spying on me? Su Qin raised his eyebrows. When he was cultivating just now, he vaguely felt a peeping gaze. It wasn't exactly spying. It was more like an ant accidentally glancing at you from afar. If he hadn't entered the realm of Arhat, Su Qin might not have noticed it. After all, this peeping was too inconspicuous. However, after attaining the realm of Arhat, Su Qin's control over himself and the outside world had reached an extreme. That was why he was able to easily lock onto this spy. Interesting. Su Qin stood up and took a step forward. In an instant, Su Qin left the back mountain and came to a corner of the Shaolin Temple. In front of Su Qin was a man in white who was kneeling on the ground and trembling all over. So, it's this generation's successor of the Flying Dagger? Su Qin only took a glance to understand the cause and effect of the matter. Although Su Qin hadn't been out of the Shaolin Temple a few times, he had heard about the deeds of the successor of the Flying Dagger. The Shaolin Temple had been open for thousands of years. Many a holy monk had fought with a certain successor of the Flying Dagger. After returning to the Shaolin Temple, they would record it in an ancient book and then put it in the Sutras Pavilion. Su Qin had stayed in the Shaolin Temple for more than 20 years and often saw this in the Sutras Pavilion. According to the records of a holy monk, the unique skill of the Flying Dagger mastered by the successor of the Flying Dagger was a pure spiritual mystic skill. It was similar to the demonic will split parasitism technique or the Dao heart demonic seed technique in the Sky Devil strategy. Even if he survives the collapse of his spirit, he will be a cripple. Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated as he judged in his heart. At this moment, he had roughly understood why the man in white ended up like this. It was nothing more than overestimating himself and wanting to peep at his spirit with the unique skill of the Flying Dagger. But it was a pity. Su Qin's spirit had already condensed into divine will, and with the attainment of Arhat, it had skyrocketed many times. In addition, at that time, Su Qin was practicing the 9 Yang divine art in the forbidden area of the back mountain. The power of the 9 suns was everywhere and reflected on his spirit. How could the man in white be able to peep at it? Greetings, Venerable Arhat. The man in white saw Su Qin appear out of thin air and faintly felt that the aura on him was the same as the one in the forbidden area of the back mountain. His voice was bitter. At this moment, how could he not know that there was really a venerable Arhat in the Shaolin Temple? If he had known this, no matter how confident and arrogant the man in white was, he would not have thought of peeping at a venerable Arhat's spirit. What a pity! Su Qin looked at the man in white and shook his head slightly. He had no intention of saving him. The man in white had only himself to blame for his fate. He could not blame anyone. Besides, his spirit had collapsed. Su Qin could not save him even if he wanted to. Thinking of this, Su Qin turned and left. He returned to the forbidden area of the back mountain to meditate on the 9 Yang divine art. Soon after, the man in white was found in the Shaolin Temple. Abbot Huiwen recognized that the man in white was the successor of the Flying Dagger of this generation. Abbot, I have disturbed the venerable of your temple. I deserve to die. Please take me in. I am willing to accompany the green lamp and the ancient Buddha for the rest of my life. The man in white lowered his eyes and said in a deep voice. Before coming to the Shaolin Temple, the man in white had always been pursuing the limits of martial arts. But after entering the Shaolin Temple and barely peeping at the tip of the iceberg in the forbidden area of the back mountain, he realized how big the world was. So what if he pursued the limits of martial arts? Compared to the one in the back mountain, he was still a drop in the ocean, unreachable. The backlash of his physical body, coupled with the collapse of his spirit, made the man in white disheartened. He had the idea of entering Buddhism and ending his life. Benefactor, you have to think carefully. Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads looked at each other and said slowly. Although the man in white was basically a cripple at this moment, he was still the successor of the Flying Dagger of this generation. Whether it was eyesight or knowledge, he was much better than ordinary martial artists. If the man in white really entered the Shaolin Temple, it would be good for the foundation of the Shaolin Temple. Abbot, I have thought it through. The man in white sighed in his heart and said in a firm tone. In that case, this poor monk will personally shave your head. Abbot Huiwen put his hands together and chanted a Buddha's name. Time flowed by and the years went by. In addition to signing in every day, Su Qin continued to cultivate and meditate. Ever since he learned that there were still martial arts legends outside the mainland and in the depths of the endless ocean, Su Qin's desire for strength surged again. Whether it is the venerable Arhat or the martial arts legends, if they want to continue to become stronger and step into an even more incredible realm, they need not only to cultivate themselves, but also to understand the world. Su Qin sat cross-legged, and his eyes became brighter. During this period of time, Su Qin's cultivation in the Arhat realm has been quite smooth through his own efforts and the continuous use of glazed golden cores. Chapter 68. What a pity! The cultivation in the realm of Arhat is completely different from the 9 grades of martial arts. After so long, I still haven't touched the bottleneck of the second heavenly layer. Su Qin sat cross-legged and couldn't help but sigh at the difficulty of cultivation. But I feel that soon, as long as I take dozens of glazed golden cores, I can almost step into the second heavenly layer. Su Qin guessed in his heart. Not only can the glazed golden core provide a huge amount of medicinal efficacy for Su Qin to absorb at all times, but it can also allow Su Qin to be in a state of epiphany at all times, allowing him to better understand and control the world. I need 1 to 2 months to digest 1 glazed golden core. Dozens of glazed golden cores will take about 100 months? Less than 10 years? Su Qin silently calculated again and was quite satisfied in his heart. It took 10 years to step into the second heavenly layer of Arhat, which was neither too fast nor too slow. If the past generations of venerable Arhat of the Shaolin Temple, or the martial arts legends outside knew what Su Qin was thinking at this moment, they would probably vomit blood in anger. Be it venerable Arhat or martial arts legends, if they want to enter the second heavenly layer from the first heavenly layer, without other opportunities, it will take at least 100 years or even hundreds of years of hard work. Many martial arts legends were still in the first heavenly layer until Shoyuan died of old age 500 years ago. But what about Su Qin? 10 years to enter the first heavenly layer, and he still thinks it's not fast? Next, Su Qin returned to his usual life again. Sign in, cultivate, sign in, cultivate, this cycle continues. Perhaps for some people, this kind of life is extremely boring, and even lonely to the point of driving them crazy. But in Su Qin's heart, it's extremely enjoyable. Everything in the world. Power? Beauty? It's just a passing cloud. What can be more comfortable than feeling that you are getting stronger every day? And just when Su Qin was addicted to sign in and cultivate, the Shaolin Temple also regained its peace. After the news of the Devil Lord's death spread, many people in Jianghu wanted to visit Su Qin. However, Abbot Huiwen rejected all of them. Su Qin had already told Abbot Huiwen not to disturb him unless it was a matter of life and death for the Shaolin Temple. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the Shaolin Temple to recruit disciples. The Shaolin Temple was a great martial arts sect in the world. In order to continue its legacy, it needed to maintain the number of disciples every year. It could not be too much, but it could not be too little. After all, whether it was the Bodhi Yard or the other yards, the annual supply of elixirs or martial arts resources was limited. The more disciples there were, the more resources would be distributed to each disciple. In this way, it was very likely that some geniuses would be buried. But it couldn't be too little. If it's too little, if something happens in the future, it may lead to a shortage of disciples. For any martial arts sect, a shortage of disciples is an extremely terrible consequence. If it's light, it will decline, and if it's heavy, it will directly be cut off. In history, many great martial arts sects like the Shaolin Temple disappeared because of a shortage of disciples. Dharma Court. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads gathered here. In addition to them, there was also a child about 10 years old. This child faintly exuded a special aura, as if some kind of Zen sound was chanting, extremely magical. Of course, this special aura can't be detected by ordinary people. Only the martial artists of the upper realm, whose body has begun to bear the world's essence qi, can vaguely feel it. This child is fated with Buddha. The Dharma court head carefully observed the child, his eyes full of amazement. This child has never been exposed to any Buddhist cultivation technique, but he can show such a Buddhist vision. It's simply rare to see one in hundreds of years. When I first saw it, I also couldn't believe it. The disciplinary court head nodded, and his gaze fell on the child again. With the aptitude he showed, as long as he doesn't die halfway, his future achievements will at least not be lower than grade 1 Great Grandmaster. When these words came out, none of the other court heads refuted. Even Abbot Huiwen was silent, apparently agreeing with this sentence. The evaluation of the disciplinary court head was already very high. The child was only 10 years old, and he already concluded that his future achievements will not be lower than grade 1 Great Grandmaster? What does this mean? It means that his potential is terrifyingly high. Although Abbot Huiwen is a grade 1 Great Grandmaster at the moment, and his talent is also good, but even if Abbot Huiwen is confident, he wouldn't dare to say that he will become a grade 1 Great Grandmaster at the age of 10. In martial Dao cultivation, if you want to enter grade 1, martial Dao aptitude is one aspect, but the acquired opportunities, tempering one's mind, and luck are also important. But now, the court heads and Abbot Huiwen concluded that the child can step into grade 1 just by looking at the aptitude shown by him. It can be imagined how high the child's position in the heart of the abbot is. You go first. Abbot Huiwen saw that the child's face was a little pale, and immediately understood that the other party was frightened, and immediately let the disciple take him to rest. You say it. What do you think of him? Abbot Huiwen turned his gaze and looked at the other court heads. The court heads looked at each other, and finally, the warrior monastery head coughed softly. Abbot, although there are many disciples in the warrior monastery, there are not many who can become useful. It is better for the warrior monastery to accept him. Nonsense. Before the warrior monastery head could speak, he was interrupted by the Arhat court head. Almost half of the disciples who enter the warrior monastery every year enter your Arhat court. In contrast, the Arhat court is really miserable. When the Arhat court head said this, he paused, looked at Abbot Huiwen, and said tentatively, "But, if the Arhat court accepts him, my commandment court is also short of people recently." Abbot Huiwen saw the court heads competing with each other, and suddenly he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Stop it." Abbot Huiwen waved his hand. "None of you are qualified to accept that child." Abbot Huiwen glanced at the crowd and finally added, "Neither am I." As soon as the words came out, the court heads were suddenly puzzled. If they were not qualified, then who was qualified? Only the Dharma court head looked thoughtful and asked carefully, "Abbot, you mean to ask the Venerable to accept him?" "That's right." Abbot Huiwen nodded slightly. When the other court heads heard this, they were slightly surprised, but felt that it was very reasonable. With the aptitude that the child showed, even if they did accept him, they didn't know how to guide him. The next day, Abbot Huiwen took the child and walked step by step toward the forbidden area in the back of the mountain. "Abbot, where are we going?" The child blinked, and his face was full of confusion. "Where are we going?" Abbot Huiwen stopped and was silent for a while, and an inexplicable awe appeared in his eyes. "I'll take you to see the real Buddha." Chapter 69. A True Buddha. The child nodded as if he understood, not daring to continue speaking. For some reason, the child vaguely sensed the seriousness of the abbot, as well as the supreme existence he was about to meet. "When you go in later, don't speak loudly. You must be respectful and don't show any emotions," Abbot Huiwen reminded the child. In Abbot Huiwen's view, the child was only in his teens after all. If he lost his composure in front of the Venerable One, who could bear the consequences if the Venerable One blamed him? The child was very sensible and remembered the abbot's words in his heart. So, Abbot Huiwen came to the forbidden area of the back mountain. Disciple Huiwen requests an audience with the Venerable One. Abbot Huiwen bowed and said loudly. A moment later, a calm voice sounded in Abbot Huiwen's ears. "Come in." Abbot Huiwen was shocked, and immediately led the child behind him into the forbidden area of the back mountain. Inside the forbidden Buddha mountain, Su Qin sat cross-legged, opened his eyes, and looked at Abbot Huiwen. "You want me to take him as a disciple?" Su Qin's eyes turned slightly and looked at the child next to him, who shrunk his head and did not dare to look at him directly. Abbot Huiwen did not need to say anything. Su Qin already knew the purpose of Abbot Huiwen's visit. Yes. Abbot Huiwen immediately said, "This child's talent is hard to come by in hundreds of years, and he has an affinity with the Buddha. If I and the other court heads take him in, it will definitely ruin his talent. His talent is not bad. He was born with a Buddha's heart." There was an inexplicable whirlpool in the depths of Su Qin's eyes, as if he could see through all the qi in the world. It was the eye of truth. Ever since he stepped into the realm of Arhat, the eye of truth seemed to have undergone some changes, and his grasp of qi had become more subtle. Under the observation of such a magical power, everything about the child was as easy as flipping the palm over for Su Qin. He could see everything clearly. Buddha heart? Abbot Huiwen's pupils shrank. In Buddhism, the Buddha heart was an illusory but real thing. Regardless of whether it was the cultivation of Buddhist techniques or the comprehension of Buddhist scriptures, a Buddhist disciple who possessed a Buddhist heart would be able to advance at a tremendous pace as if he had the help of the heavens. In the thousands of years since the Shaolin Temple's establishment, only 10 disciples with Buddha's heart had appeared. The final achievements of these 10 Buddha heart disciples were at least peak grade 1, and there were even 3 grade 1 great perfection. Abbot Huiwen had thought that the child's aptitude was terrifying, but he did not expect the child to have a Buddhist heart. It should be known that the possessor of the Buddha's heart is at least a peak grade 1 great grandmaster, not the grade 1 great grandmaster that Abbot Huiwen and the court heads had guessed. Although peak grade 1 great grandmasters and grade 1 great grandmasters both belong to grade 1 realm, the gap in combat power is like a natural chasm. Does he have a Buddhist name? Su Qin asked casually. When Abbot Huiwen heard this, he immediately suppressed the shock in his heart and quickly said, "This child has no parents and has a miserable life, so I named him Xianku." Xianku? Su Qin smiled. "I understand. You go out, I'll think about it for a while." Su Qin slowly closed his eyes and said softly. Abbot Huiwen bowed again and respectfully led Xianku out of the back mountain. Until Abbot Huiwen completely left. Su Qin sighed. "It's a pity. It's an incomplete Buddha heart." Su Qin shook his head slightly and said slowly. As early as the first time, Su Qin noticed that Xianku's Buddha heart was incomplete. If it was a complete Buddha heart, it would be impossible for Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads to see any abnormalities. For a true Buddha heart possessor, other than those peak grade 1 who have condensed divine sense, or even venerable Arhat and legends, no one else would be able to discover it. Only when the Buddha heart possessor really accumulates and soars to the sky will the world know about it. Of course, Su Qin is not interested in the Buddha heart possessor. Not to mention that Xianku's Buddha heart is incomplete, even if it was a complete Buddha heart. So what? Throughout the thousands of years of the Shaolin Temple, the 10 Buddha heart possessors, the highest achievement was only grade 1 great perfection. Perhaps in the early stage of cultivation, or even in the grade 1 realm, the Buddha heart possessor is like a god, incredibly fast. But if you want to take the last step and achieve Arhat, just relying on the Buddha heart is not enough. Even when a grade 1 great perfection is about to capture the qi between heaven and earth, the Buddha heart will drag you down. This is also the reason why none of the 10 Buddha heart possessors in history can achieve Arhat. Success is due to the Buddha heart. Failure is due to the Buddha heart. Next, Su Qin immersed himself in cultivation again. The 9 Yang divine art, obtained last time, when cultivated to the extreme, can produce 9 kinds of Yang power. Su Qin raised his right hand, and 9 kinds of Yang power, completely refined by the 9 Yang divine art, constantly intertwined and collided between his fingers. At this moment, if Su Qin is not careful and releases these 9 kinds of aura, I'm afraid the entire Shaolin Temple will be burned to ashes. If I can sign in and get another true scripture, the 9 Yin true scripture, which is as famous as the 9 Yang divine art, then I can use the 9 kinds of Yang power of the 9 Yang divine art and the 9 kinds of Yin power of the 9 Yin true scripture. Yin and Yang generation, will it greatly improve my body again? Su Qin's thoughts fluctuated. As early as more than 10 years ago, Signin tasted the sweetness of the two cultivation techniques, Invincible Vajra Divine Art and Lunar Body Refining Technique. At that time, these two cultivation techniques directly improved Signin's body to another level. In addition, Signin's Shoyuan was doubled because of this. It's incredible. At this moment, Signin felt the 9 kinds of yang power, which is far beyond the Invincible Vajra Divine Art, and thought quickly. Signin was very clear in his heart that forging the body with the power of yin and yang is extremely risky. Although yin and yang generate each other, they also restrain each other. Without the eyes of truth, Signin's body explosion is far more likely than body tempering. This is also the reason why Grade 1 Great Grandmasters can only choose the boundless lunar body or the boundless solar body to transform their body. And it's because they don't want yin and yang to generate each other, but they don't dare. 9 Yin True Scripture. Signin thought for a while, and finally sighed. 9 Yin True Scripture is not a divine art of the Shaolin Temple, and now that the demon subduing tower's Dao accumulation is exhausted, he can no longer sign in. Signin doesn't think that he can sign in and obtain this true scripture in the Shaolin Temple. Right. It's been a while since I entered the Arhat realm, and my realm has been completely stabilized. Now I can comprehend the real Buddha's palm. Signin's thoughts moved and he felt the Buddha golden body in his eyebrows that was pointing at the heaven and earth. Chapter 70. The Buddha's palm was the technique Signin obtained from his first signin. It was known as the strongest technique of the Shaolin Temple and was personally taught by Buddha. At the same time, the Buddha's palm was also the highest level technique Signin had obtained over the past 20 years. Since Daoism was able to suppress the devil Buddha with the Buddha's palm, I should be able to use it with my current strength. Signin's thoughts turned quickly, and a huge amount of divine sense began to pour into the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows. Buzz! Signin seemed to be in a vast void, dreamy, deep, and boundless. In front of him, there was a golden Buddha pointing at the sky and touching the earth, filling the void with Zen chants. Under the heavens and earth, I am the unique and righteous. With a boom, the golden Buddha in Signin's mind seemed to appear with countless swastikas, innumerable proverbs, and Zen chants, shaking his mind. Finally, it turned back into a golden Buddha, still high and mighty, looking down on all living beings. At this moment, Signin only felt a sharp pain in his mind and subconsciously withdrew from the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows. This is... Signin opened his eyes, and his face was full of shock. In the blink of an eye, Signin had roughly understood some information about the Buddha's palm. The Buddha's palm was divided into 9 styles, and each style was independent and dependent on each other. There was no distinction between the top and the bottom. At this moment, Signin had mastered the first style of the Buddha's palm. I am the unique and righteous. This style represented the ultimate destructive power, and only powerhouses at least at the level of Arhat could use this style. Signin had a feeling that if he really used this style, it would definitely be able to destroy everything. Of course, Signin knew very well that this was just his illusion. No matter how strong the Buddha's palm was, it was still based on the user's own strength. If Signin had the true strength of the Buddha and used the first move of I, the unique and righteous, he would probably be the only one in the entire universe. But now, Signin was just an insignificant first heaven Arhat. Even if he used this move, he could at most defeat those of the same level and those of a higher level. It was impossible for him to soar into the sky and truly stand shoulder to shoulder with gods, demons, immortals, and Buddhas. The reason why Signin had the illusion that he could destroy everything was that when he received the inheritance of the Buddha's palm, he subconsciously put himself in the perspective of the golden Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows. With my current strength, I can only comprehend the first move of the Buddha's palm. Signin rubbed his eyebrows as he thought to himself. Just now, when he was immersed in the ancestral aperture between his eyebrows, he had only received the first move before he was forced to withdraw from it due to the excruciating pain in his mind. But it's still okay. Just the first move, the unique and righteous, is enough for me to study for a very long time. Su Qin was not disappointed at all. Instead, he was looking forward to it. After all, the entire inheritance of the Buddha's palm was with the golden Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows. It would not run away. Once Su Qin's strength reached a certain level, it would be imparted to him. Naturally, Su Qin did not have any other emotions. The level of the Buddha's palm is too high. Su Qin thought for a while and felt very emotional. Originally, Su Qin thought that the Buddha's palm was a martial art at the level of Arhat. But now, it seemed that Arhat was only able to activate the lowest level of the Buddha's palm. 900 years ago, the Buddha's palm that Tarahan used to suppress the devil Buddha should not be the first move, the unique and righteous. Su Qin glanced at Foshan, his thoughts fluctuating. The 9 moves of the Buddha's palm were independent and dependent on each other. There was no distinction between them. Each of the 9 moves was different. Some were good at destruction, some were good at suppression, and some were good at defense. Su Qin guessed that the Buddha's palm that Tarahan used to suppress the devil Buddha 900 years ago should be more of a suppression move. Otherwise, if it was like the Buddha's palm that Su Qin obtained from the first move, only I am the best, which was biased towards destruction, then the demon Buddha would have been suppressed to the point that not even dregs were left 900 years ago. How could it still be able to survive until 900 years later? Last time when I came to restabilize the seal, the devil Buddha once said, the true meaning of the Buddha. It should be referring to the golden Buddha in the primal aperture at mid-brows. Su Qin thought silently. Over the years, he had been browsing countless ancient books in the Shaolin Temple. Naturally, he understood what the true meaning of the Buddha's palm was. If the Buddha's palm was still traceable in the thousands of years of Shaolin Temple's history, then the true meaning of the Buddha's palm only existed in legends. To put it simply, the 9 moves of the Buddha's palm were different. No one could master all 9 moves at the same time. But if one had the true meaning of the Buddha's palm, it would be different. The true meaning of the Buddha's palm was equivalent to the outline of the Buddha's palm. It had the effect of controlling the 9 moves. After receiving the inheritance of the first move of the Buddha's palm, Su Qin's life returned to normal. Every day, he would sign in, cultivate, and comprehend the first move of the Buddha's palm. His days were especially fulfilling. There shouldn't be much Dao accumulation left in the Sutra Pavilion and the Bodhi Court. On this day, Su Qin finished signing in outside the Bodhi Court. After returning to the forbidden area in the back mountain, he was deep in thought. If my Dao accumulation is exhausted, I should leave the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin's eyes were calm. No one knew what he was thinking. Looks like it's time to leave some foundation for the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin sighed softly in his heart. He didn't dare to say anything. After all, he had stayed in the Shaolin Temple for more than 20 years. In the past 20 years, Su Qin couldn't ignore the vegetarian meals provided by the Shaolin Temple. What should I leave behind? Su Qin fell into deep thought. Su Qin had thought about this question long before he stepped into the realm of Arhat. However, Su Qin realized at that time that if the future disciples of the Shaolin Temple couldn't do it, it would be meaningless to leave more. It wasn't as if Arhat hadn't appeared in the Shaolin Temple in the past. Many venerable Arhat had left some foundation for the Shaolin Temple before they passed away. However, these foundations could be preserved in a short period of time. But over a long period of time, decades or hundreds of years, no matter how strong the foundation was, it would lose its effectiveness. Since things don't work, I'll leave someone for the Shaolin Temple. Su Qin spread out his divine sense and scanned the entire Shaolin Temple and finally shrouded the Dharma court. Inside the Dharma court, Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads were chatting with Xian Ku. Last time, Abbot Huiwen personally brought Xian Ku to see Su Qin, hoping that Su Qin would accept Xian Ku as his disciple. At that time, although Su Qin wasn't interested, he didn't immediately refuse and only said that he would consider it. The Buddha's heart is incomplete. Can't you just fix it? Su Qin slowly got up and stepped out of the forbidden area. Dharma court. Abbot, what did the Venerable One say? The warrior monastery court head looked at Abbot Huiwen and asked. The Venerable One said that he would consider it for a while. Abbot Huiwen was silent for a while, and then said truthfully, "Consider it for a while." As soon as he said that, the other court heads fell silent. Although the Venerable One didn't refuse, he probably wasn't interested in accepting a disciple. Otherwise, there was no need to consider it at all. What a pity about Xian Ku's talent. The commandment court head shook his head, and Xian Ku heard the conversation between Abbot Huiwen and the court heads, and his head hung low, as if he had made a big mistake. Just when Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads were certain that Xian Ku wouldn't become that person's disciple. Buzz! A faint Buddha's light began to spread. The Zen chants continued, and golden lotuses bloomed like glass, untainted by dust. Under the shocked gazes of Abbot Huiwen and the others, a figure slowly walked out. He was covered in layers of Buddha's light as if he was far away on the horizon. Golden lotuses bloomed under his feet, and the Zen chants were thick and dignified, as if a Buddha had descended to the world to save all living beings. The figure walked to Xian Ku step by step, and with a golden lotus, he raised his right hand, and his 5 slender fingers stroked Xian Ku's forehead. "The Buddha caresses my forehead, and I see the Buddha at the end of the road." Chapter 71. Inside the Dharma Court. The light of Buddha filled the air. Golden lotuses bloomed. Su Qin took a step forward, raised his right hand, and gently stroked Xian Ku's forehead with his long and powerful fingers. The incomplete heart of Buddha was basically a congenital cause. But no matter how incomplete it was, there was always a part of the heart of Buddha. With this part of the heart of Buddha, it was completely possible to make it whole. Of course, in the whole world, only Su Qin could do this. Even if the venerable Arhat of the Shaolin Temple came back to life, or if it was a martial arts legend from the outside world, it would not be so easy to make the heart of Buddha whole. The eye of truth could see through all the qi in the world, and the heart of Buddha was naturally one of them. Coupled with Su Qin's powerful strength, the combination of the two could achieve this. Venerable! Venerable! Xian Ku opened his eyes wide. When Su Qin's 5 fingers stroked his forehead, he only felt warm and uncomfortable. Even Xian Ku felt his heart beating faster and faster, and the blood in his body was boiling, as if some kind of transformation was happening. Venerable! Greetings, Venerable! Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were first surprised, but then seemed to realize something, and bowed to Su Qin. In the entire Shaolin Temple, only the Venerable standing in the clouds could walk into the Dharma court so silently and cause such a phenomenon. Although Abbot Huiwen and the court heads were curious about why Su Qin came at this time, they guessed that it should be related to Xian Ku. Time passed slowly. The light of Buddha slowly spread, as if it was eternal. Abbot Huiwen and the court heads waited respectfully, without the slightest impatience. In fact, under the light of Buddha, even if it was not targeted at them, Abbot Huiwen and the court heads still benefited a little. Half an hour later, Su Qin slowly withdrew his right hand. Just now, he had used his Arhat's inner energy to help the little monk Xian Ku complete the incomplete Buddha's heart. He had even helped him to cleanse his marrow and tendons. After all, in Su Qin's heart, Xian Ku was the foundation he left for the Shaolin Temple. Naturally, he would pay more attention to him. If the other martial artists in Jianghu were to know that Xian Ku, a young novice monk in his teens, had been cleansed by Venerable Arhat, they would definitely go mad with jealousy. It was worth noting that both Venerable Arhat and martial arts legends had long transformed to another level after experiencing the ultimate leap. Venerable Arhat's meridian changing and marrow cleansing was enough to allow Xian Ku to walk in front of most martial artists in the world before he even stepped on the path of martial arts cultivation. If there are any problems in the future, you can find me at the back of the mountain. Su Qin left these words and turned to leave. The Buddha's light dissipated. The golden lotus melted. The Dharma court immediately regained its peace. It was not until a long time after Su Qin had left that Abbot Huiwen and the other court heads dared to speak. Abbot, did the Venerable One accept Xian Ku as his disciple? The warrior monastery's court head could not help but ask. Although Su Qin did not explicitly say that he accepted Xian Ku as his disciple, since he allowed him to go to the back of the mountain, it was obvious that he had already acknowledged him in his heart. I don't know. How can the Venerable One's thoughts be guessed by us? Abbot Huiwen shook his head slightly, but doubts arose in his heart. But why did the Venerable One come here this time? Speaking of this, Abbot Huiwen turned his gaze and looked at Xian Ku, who had already fallen asleep. Abbot Huiwen finally realized that something was wrong. The current Xian Ku did not have the same vision as before. It was as if everything had returned to normal. Returning to the origin. This is returning to the origin. Abbot Huiwen's face was shocked as he muttered to himself. The other court heads were also in disbelief. At this moment, even if they did not know what Su Qin had done to Xian Ku, they realized that it should be a great thing. Looking at the world, the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. If Xian Ku still maintained the vision from before, no matter how good his aptitude was, he would still suffer in the future. But now, everything was hidden deep within his body. It was neither hot nor hot, but it went straight to the sky. The back of the mountain. Su Qin sat cross-legged, his inner strength slowly circulating in his body, constantly integrating into every piece of flesh and blood, constantly tempering his body. The inner strength of the Arhat state has undergone a fundamental change from the inner strength of the 9th grade martial arts. Su Qin opened his eyes and carefully felt everything in his body. If the inner strength of a grade 1 great grandmaster is like flowing water, then the inner strength of a peak grade 1 great grandmaster is like wood. Then the inner strength of venerable Arhat is like tempered steel. A wisp of Arhat's inner strength is enough to kill a group of grade 1 great grandmasters. The two are not on the same level at all. In other words, the inner strength of the Arhat state is no longer called inner strength, but true essence or true force? Su Qin thought silently in his heart. It is really true that the inner strength of the Arhat state and the inner strength of the 9th grade martial arts are not the same thing. It is indeed wrong to call them by the same name. The effect of the glazed golden core is almost over. Su Qin's thoughts moved, and another bottle of glazed golden core appeared in Su Qin's hands. Suddenly, the world's essence qi began to faintly boil and gather, but it was immediately suppressed by Su Qin's divine sense. Gulp. Su Qin swallowed the glazed golden core directly. During this period, Su Qin has consumed nearly 10 glazed golden cores, which really made him feel distressed for a while. However, through signing in, Su Qin once again obtained more than a dozen glazed golden cores, which basically broke even, and there was still a surplus. Whoosh! The colorless and transparent glazed golden core entered his abdomen, and suddenly a huge medicinal power began to spread, constantly condensing into true essence and flowing to his limbs and bones. As Su Qin continues to cultivate, his strength is slowly but firmly moving towards a higher level. Next, Su Qin returned to the past again. Signing in, cultivating, and comprehending Buddha's palm's first move, only I am supreme, every day. However, in addition to this, Su Qin will occasionally give pointers to Xian Ku. It has to be said that Xian Ku, who has completed his Buddha's heart, has an incredible perception. Any martial art or Buddhist scripture is basically understood by him. This also saves Su Qin a lot of trouble. He only needs to give pointers from time to time. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. In the past 3 years, the Shaolin Temple hasn't changed much. The only difference is that Xian Ku has stepped into the 7th grade martial artist realm. This made Su Qin quite satisfied. It took him more than 2 months to become a 7th grade martial artist, so Xian Ku is already not bad. However, while the time in the Shaolin Temple is slow, the outside world is surging. The youngest disciple of Daoist Zhang of Wudong Mountain went down the mountain with a sword, wanting to challenge the heroes of the world. The imperial teacher of Mengyuan led an army of millions and destroyed a small country. The emperor of Tang's palace, the emperor of Tang ordered that Prince Li Xing be conferred the title of crown prince, causing an uproar. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.